on this computer. Okay. All right, for those following along at home, this is our last video. We're going to finish up with finish up the rest of the CRUD actions. In addition to, we're going to talk about strong parameters, edit, update, partials, delete and destroy. And then Greg had mentioned wanting to look at the user and cohort relationship inside our Betsu Code app. So it'll be a good chance to cover that, just to look at some model.
Thanks.
Some model relationships. Okay. So let's do strong parameters first. So strong parameters is still, in fact, I posted on one of my local Slack channel. I still haven't fully embraced. I mean, you do it because Rails has you do it. You don't have a choice, and I trust Rails from a security standpoint. But I'll just admit that I haven't fully. And you know what? Let me stop sharing real quick. Share my entire desktop, not just the web browser. So I haven't fully internalized the advantages because, and so let's look at our users controller. Let's go down to strong parameters here. So for way back when I started doing Rails at Rails 2, there was no mechanism for this, and essentially what this is protecting from is what we call mass assignment. This is not just a Rails thing. I think mass assignment is just is a sort of an HTML internet thing, right? And basically what that is on form. I mean, the classic example is when you do a form submission. And so for instance, let's go ahead and pull up the app. And so when you do a form submission, and let me fix this in my view. I was playing around with some things. Well, I've broken it now, so I might as well, let's go ahead and stop here and get it fixed, because we're going to need to look at this. Let's see, everything's there. That's okay. That's okay. Let's remove this from here. That's okay. And then let's go ahead and stop and restart our server. Okay. So again, strong parameters. So for instance, if we edit a recruit, you know, if we add some information here and we click the update user button, you know, you're doing a form submission, and on that form submission, you're using what's called mass assignment, but essentially you've got multiple fields that you're going to be updating at once. And let me go back and let's do, there we go. Let's just do that, and then let's do update, and then so we see it update here, and then let's go to the console. So yeah, when you look at an update statement like this, and you're seeing essentially all of these fields are being updated, even though we only changed one, you're still sending all of those parameters along when the update's being done. And in fact, we see the parameters here. So this is the, you know, we call this mass assignment in the web development world. Again, it's not just a Rails thing. And so the danger there is that if someone, if a nefarious person finds a way to sort of make a form submission like this, they could update some things that you wouldn't want updated. For instance, you know, a password or an administrator field or something like that. Okay. So what strong parameters does is essentially requires us to explicitly say what we are allowing to be updated. Now, where this is problematic to me is, like for the password field, you've got to do that. You've got to include that because you want the user to be able to update their password. So it's sort of like, you know, we're allowing that anyway. So what have we really gained by doing it? So that's where the sort of breakdown is for me. I posted this in a local Slack channel, and someone suggested, and that actually makes good sense, is that the admin flag is a good example of that, and we're actually implementing that here, right? Our users, we've got an admin flag, and I'm actually noticing that we've got role here, which I think we've removed. I replaced the role with the admin flag. But the admin flag is an example of, we're not whitelisting it here because we don't allow that to be updated. The user, we're not allowing the user to update that. The only way that gets updated is essentially right now, the way we're doing it is just inside the console, right? We'd have to actually log into the app real time, and user.rb. Yeah, I've got.
Well, and then I guess it's how you're storing the password too, right?
Well,
if the password is stored like in a hash.
Well, and in fact, that's a really good point. Yeah, thank you for saying that, because that sort of at least answers that and helps me feel better about that. Right? You couldn't. Yeah, I don't think you can Yeah, although you can go to the console, because I've done that before. You can go to the console and update a password if you pass the right hash in. And when I say pass the right hash in, you just have to use, like, there's a I think, if you recall, bcrypt is the gem.
It has secure password.
Yeah, the hashing gem that we're using, and I think you can manually do it. So but that is a good point. You're not going to be able to send a plain text via a form submission. You're not going to be able to send a plain text password via post and
but
update a password.
Isn't that like the security feature in Rails, where even if it's stored or reassigned in the console, it still says filtered when it's shown, and then the digest is still built off of the hash. So even if I did, as I understand it, if I went in, could infiltrate to be able to change the password, I still couldn't see what that password is, because I don't have the secret key.
Right.
That has secure password functionality.
Yeah. So that's
now, I don't
that's
know,
a good point.
That's how
well, that all sounds right. Although the fact that I still can't articulate that after 10 years of doing Rails is unsettling to me. I feel like I should be able to do that at this point, and I still am not quite able to do it. So anyway, we'll just leave it there. But the isAdmin flag in this case is a good example of that. You wouldn't want someone to be able to change the admin flag on a particular user via a form submission. So that's a case where, again, we can do it in the console, but we can't do it via form submission because it's not on our. It's not. We don't have it whitelisted here inside our inside our strong parameters settings. Okay. Let's see. And then, I had some notes here. Mass assignment allows multiple values. I covered that. And then, the params.permit is used to whitelist attributes. So, okay. Let's talk about edit and update. So the edit and update actions. So a couple things here. Obviously, we need an ID. And then we also use the find feature in Rails to actually find and update a given record. So for instance, if we look at let me close a couple of these tabs to the right. And then let's look at cohorts controller. So the edit function basically is blank. It's just sort of here as a placeholder for you to know that for you to sort of see that the action is there. But the edit action, again, that I use the default scaffolding for this, so there's no code there. But update is really where all the where the magic happens. And essentially all we've got is a respond to block here, and then we're passing in the cohort params in this case, and it would be the same with the user params too. Let's see if we've still got that. The same thing here. In this case, we did an update of a user. One thing to note is that this is actually a patch here, and the video on LinkedIn does a good job of sort of explaining the difference in a put and a patch. One of the things he mentioned is that I think we're using even though it's a post, technically it's a post call in the form that they're using a patch. Let's see if we can actually see that we're actually using a patch. Let's go to edit. And then let's see if we can inspect. Yeah, the hidden value. He makes this point, and this is an interesting one, that technically this is a post. Okay, here it is here. So technically the HTTP sort of implementation is a post request, but the way Rails gets around this, and the way, and I've heard this before, so, and I can't speak too broadly to this, but I'll just sort of regurgitate back what I've heard, which is that the patch method that HTTP uses is still not 100% like widely accepted on the web and inside web browsers, whereas post requests are, like all, I guess all web browsers, or at least, you know, the vast majority of web browsers use post, whereas patch is relatively new, or at least not all web browsers implement a patch. So therefore, from an HTTP standpoint, it's a post request, but then you see you've got this hidden field here that uses a patch. And I'll just stop there without being able to sort of speak more in depth on it. That sort of scratches the surface of what I understand about it. But just know that Rails is using that under the covers. You know, again, I don't think you'd from a practical standpoint, I don't think you necessarily need to know that at a very deep level. But you know, one of the areas it is helpful in is, you know, more and more we're seeing Rails, and this, again, this is not just a Rails thing when we're talking about HTTP methods, but with the proliferation of API servers and being, you know, using HTTP to access those things, then that's where, you know, really having a good understanding of get, post, patch, update, those all those HTTP verbs is helpful. Okay. So that is the update method, and again, as we said, we're passing the params on, and then we've got a simple if-else statement, so that in case this update fails for one reason or another, either because of that validation or some other, you know, some other issue that might happen, essentially the form will reload here. Notice the in the else statement. So if the model is saved, then you're gonna get this stuff. Otherwise, again, it's just going to re-render the edit view or the edit form, and then it's also going to display any errors that are on the page. And in fact, we could probably force that here by, I think we've got validation for first name and last name. So if we try to remove the first name from this person and do update, yeah, we get this. Notice we get this first name can't be blank. But again, notice that it reloaded our form for us rather than sending us back to the index page or something like that.
And the idea is that, like, it doesn't give you an error because city, state, country, zip, all of that other stuff is empty.
Right. Well, it's giving the error because, right, we've only got validation. I think first name, last name, and email address are the only validations.
But that's in that validation function, not out of this controller here.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's set up inside the model, right? In fact, here's our validations.
Right. Okay. Yep.
So yeah, we've got first name, last name, and password. In fact, which
that presence true one forces that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, first name, last name, and then email is there too. I was going to say, I was wondering why I didn't see email, but yeah. So that's sort of how the edit and update functions work. Okay. Let's talk about, I mean, the other point there too, real quick, is that obviously you need an ID for all these things too. And if we go back and look at the console, notice, again, here's our patch method that we talked about. Notice we've got the ID here. And then, of course, in the parameters, we've got the ID of 3 there. So obviously, we're updating, as opposed to the index views where you might be, you're looking at all rows. Here, you're obviously, when you're updating a record, you're going to be doing it on a specific row. And then same for the show. You know, another example of that is that the show method because you're showing a specific record. Okay. All right, partials and helpers. So we've talked about this some, so we'll just do it real quick and maybe we'll try and make something work. I probably shouldn't code on the fly here, but we may try it anyway. So by default, again, we've talked about using scaffolding. Scaffolding, the most obvious example of it is the underscore form method. So for instance, we go in or the underscore form template, and these partials, they're partial templates is what they are. That's where the partials word comes from, is you've got this idea of a partial template that's going to be shared amongst multiple files. So in this case, the edit form, we know uses it. And if you remember, all we do is specify, we leave the underscore off when we're referencing a partial, even though it has an underscore in the actual file name, we leave that. The convention is to leave that off, and then Rails knows to look for the underscore. And then so yeah, the edit action uses it, and then new uses it also. And just for kicks, let's see if we can do it. If we create a new file, let's say we want to call this, I'm just going to say here is some text from our partial. Save that. And now we're going to save this as underscore my form dot HTML. All right, and so we could reference my form. So let's go to index maybe, and let's do this. Let's just copy from edit. Let's just copy this chunk, and let's go to, this is our cohorts index. So we'll put it right underneath the title, and here we'll take out, we're not going to pass any object to it or anything like that, and we'll call it my underscore form. So let's see if this, so index and then my form. So if we reload the cohorts index page, let's see if we see this. Here's some text from my partials. So cohort, yeah, so here's some text from my partial. So again, the idea here is that anytime you've got, the idea is focusing on the dry principle here. Do not repeat yourself. Many forms, you end up sort of having the same views or the same rows or text inside them. Partials are a way to sort of streamline that. So, again, in the example, I mean, this was sort of a contrived example, but with the underscore form example, edit and edit, and then what was the other one that was using the edit and edit and new? Yeah. Edit and new views both use a form that's just going to display all of the attributes of a given object, so it makes sense in that case to create a single form, in this case an underscore form, and just include all those fields there.
Yeah, so question, say we were building something and there was a shopping cart and we needed to use that form on more than one page, more than one group, right? So we've got cohorts. So say we had a shopping cart form and we wanted to use it for vegetables and fruits and dairy and meat. Would you take a form or a partial like that and put it in the application controller so you could reach through and grab those? Or?
So you can, right, you could do it right. That's one way, that's one example. In fact, let's see, does our applications, yeah, for fact, we're doing it for our okay. Underscore so for navigation, right? Yeah. Inside of our recruit tracker app. Yeah, inside our recruit tracker app, all these different places, we'll notice obviously the nav bar stays there. So rather than duplicating that code on each one of these pages, we've got a single, underscore navigation. And in this case, we're not including that on the individual pages. We're putting this inside the layout, application layout here. Yeah, here's our render navigation here. So, right, if it's going to be a top level, so like in this case, the example I used for the cohorts, it was only the cohorts view that we wanted to make this this form accessible. But obviously, if you wanted it at a higher level, then yeah, right, application is a good place to put that. And then you can, I think you can pass in, I don't know what all the options are, but I think you can pass in a specific a path to these. I mean, by default, Rails looks in the application folder for a partial, and then I think the next place it looks is inside the local folder for it. But I think you can specify a path there, so you can sort of mix and match things, and just depending on what the proper location for something would be, you can put it wherever you like. Okay. Let's see, anything else on partials? So that was partials, and then helper methods. So again, we talk about, and we've got an example of helper methods that we've used inside our Recruit Tracker app. So we'll look at that. But again, helper methods are methods that can be used inside view templates, and really they can be used. I mean, you know, the helper methods we've got. So let's look at those inside of our app helpers. So we had, I'm thinking, yeah, we actually don't have any helper methods. We put them inside the application controller. Let's look at application controller. Yeah, we've got, so it's a little bit confusing. If you notice, we've got this specific, we created helper methods associated with the current user and application admin, and we're using those. Let's see if we're using those inside views and controllers or both. Current user. So for instance, here we're using these inside. So yeah, we're using these in both views and the controller. So for instance, let's just look at an example of each of those. For instance, in our index, when we're viewing other users in the system, we only want admins to be able to look at the current cohort. In this case, I've got a get current cohort method that returns all the users in a given cohort. So we're using that current user method there. We're also using it inside our underscore navigation. I guess that's a good example of any. But here, if you're logged in, I mean, essentially that's what current user does, is just checking to see if you're logged in or not. If you're logged in, obviously you get the nav view and menu items and things like that. If you're not logged in, then I think the login and sign up forms are the only thing you get. So the way this would work inside, let's create an application helper. In fact, that's what I was sort of experimenting with earlier. This will be a contrived example, but let's see. Let's call it uppercase. You know, let's say, again, this is sort of contrived because you could just call the toUpper method inside any view you want. But let's say we wanted a method that would be available to all of our views where we could uppercase a word. We could pass a word to it, and it would make that word uppercase. So I'm just going to say word, and then let's do word.toUpper. So this is what I was doing earlier, and I wasn't quite seeing it working the way I would expect it, but let's try it now.
I've not ever heard that toUpper method. I only know the upcase one.
Yeah, let's see what, yeah, and in fact, I could be wrong. That one of the downsides of teaching Java and C++ is part-time is that I start getting methods confused. I'm almost sure that Java has a toUpper, so maybe it's, but anyway, it'll fail. If we see it fail when we get there, then we know we can fix it. But so let's go to our, let's do this. Let's close all. Let's do index. Let's try our users index. So first, let's make sure we're in the right place. Okay, good. So that's okay. And then if we put, so if we do upper underscore case here, let's see what we get.
The method has another P in it. So it's like a triple P in uppercase from the.
Yeah. Okay, let's go back to this. Upper case. Okay, yeah, good. So yeah, I think you're right. Is it upcase?
Upcase, one word. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, here we go. And you can see it upcase these. Okay. Yeah, I was thinking there was a two upper. I can't remember. There is. I'm sure Ruby's got one that only uppercase is the first letter. So that's what I was thinking. But anyway, the idea here is we've created this in the application controller, and so this could be available to any view that we would want. Now, I was going to say this is somewhat contrived because we could just do upcase here, and it would should do the exact same thing.
Well, I think you got to string it on the end, right? User dot first
Dot
name
upcase.
Capitalize, yeah. Capitalize maybe is what you want.
Let's do dot upcase too. Let's just see. Yeah, and then yeah, capitalize. I think you're right, Cat.
Yeah, I don't know if it's there anymore.
Yeah. Now I think they were already they may have already had capital letters at the beginning. But anyway, that sort of gives you a sense of what helper methods do. And again, generally those are available to the views. Like you'll see it a lot in like date and time functions are nice for that. If you have you know, if you have a specific date and time format that you want to use, you know, across your app, then yeah, helper method is a good thing to create for that way. And then anywhere you've got a date time, let's say, or maybe there's a dollar, you know, you want to add.
Yeah, I was just thinking dollar signs, or
you want to add a
financial
dollar sign to the front. You want maybe two decimal places at the end, rather than having to inside all your views. Remember to put that dollar sign in front. You know, you can have a 2 US dollars or something like that method that you would set up as a helper method. Then anywhere in your view where you want that same format, then you could apply it there. Okay. All right, that's helper methods and view templates. All right, let's look at delete and destroy. So again, similar to the edit function we talked about, you're going to want an ID. Obviously, delete or destroy is going to occur on a specific record. Now there are methods like destroy all that you can use if you want to nuke all, if you want to blow away all objects in a database. You can do things like destroy all, and it's destroy underscore all. But in this case, yeah, the delete method is going to require a single ID. Delete uses find, and then destroy uses find plus destroy. So let's look at, let's look at, let's go ahead and remove this so I don't have to worry about it tripping me up. And then we'll just close that. So the destroy method here, so notice there's not a delete, specifically a delete action. Again, this was created via scaffolding, but in this case, it's pretty simple, right? We're just simply calling the object and the destroy method. Now, again, keep in mind, scaffolding sets up this set cohort, set underscore cohort method up for us, which gets the specific object that you want to do anything to. So in this case, when we think about the default actions inside the controller, any of them that have an ID associated with them, show, update, edit, and then destroy to. They're going to use this set cohort method to find whatever the active sort of object that you want to do the particular action to. That's how they're going to find it here. And in this case, then yeah, we're just essentially it just blows it away, and then it's going to redirect you back to the sort of whatever top level, if you will, model that you're interacting with. If we look at the view, and we look at the destroy, so link to destroy. So notice here, this is sort of really where the under the covers magic happens. The method is delete, and then this data confirm, all that does the pop-up for you that when you go to remove a cohort, so if I do delete recruit, same way, this little pop-up that pops up here, that's basically all this data confirm does. And you can use that anywhere. This is a handy little, you can stick this into any view and associate it with a link to. So anytime you want to put a warning message there, you can add that. In fact, I think I added it to the, let's see. Yeah, I'm not logged in. I added it on the recruit side. In fact, let's look at that. Let's do show. Yeah, I just added this data confirm here. So this is if current user's not admin. So this is if you're a recruit and you're going to submit, you've completed all your work in your profile and you're ready to submit it to the Vets Who Code administrator to review. I just added this confirm. So when you click, when you're ready to submit, please ensure all your pre-work is complete before proceeding. So that's a handy little function that Rails.
Yeah, and it's a nice like UI for the
and it's
user,
cheap,
right?
It's easy and it's cheap. And if you just want to pop something up, a warning message or something like that, it's it's sort of there. You've got it there for free. Let's see. And another thing I made a note about, he doesn't talk about this in the video, but I think it's important for like more sophisticated apps, and this sort of has some bearing on our user cohort model relationship that we've got, is the difference in delete versus destroy. And basically, I think I found this off Stack Overflow, but it was pretty, it sort of nails it on the head. But destroy runs any callbacks on the model, whereas delete does not. So delete just deletes a single record, and that's all it does. Destroy looks at any callbacks, and we say callbacks, at least in my mind, in the relationship, in this kind of model relationship we've got, any relationships that it has with other data, or if there's any dependencies on other data, then it can, depending on how you implement it, it can destroy those things too. So for instance, and this leads us up into our user cohort relationship that we've got set up. Let me pull up both of those, user.rb.
So the idea being there, I should always destroy instead of deleting.
Well, no, not necessarily.
Or,
you just need you need to be aware of the two and make a decision on what you want to do. So in this case, you don't really want, like, so when we look at the cohort and user relationship that we've got, cohort has many users, user belongs to a cohort. We would not want, now the way we implement this by default now, if we just did so if I went in and deleted a cohort, in fact, we should probably just do it just to see. I'm gonna let's just blow up this app because it'll be easy enough to fix later on. So right now our noobs cohort is the current cohort. All right. If I blow away this noob, so if I blow away the noobs cohort, essentially you're going to have what we like to call orphaned records there, right? There's an association. These users are going to be associated with a cohort that no longer exists. Now,
Yeah,
what's the
so they're
ramification?
just going to be hanging out, right?
They're going to be hanging out. Well, and not just hanging out, probably worse things are going to happen. So let's go ahead and blow it up
Yeah,
and let's
okay.
just see what happens. All right, so we removed it. So our cohort still loads fine, but we go here up, we got a problem, right? Because if you remember on this user page, we're displaying the cohort. Well, in this case, we're not displaying the cohort necessarily, but we are running a method that says, hey, get whatever the current cohort
Yeah,
is.
get that group of users.
Yeah, go get that group of users. In this case, cohort.whereActive equals true, admin equals false. Yeah, these users are associated with, I think the noobs cohort was cohort 1. These users are associated with cohort 1, but cohort 1 doesn't exist anymore. So these are the kind of things you got to be careful about and be mindful of. One of the first big apps I wrote had a lot of model relationships like this. So like what I did is again, it was a different relationship model, but essentially when I'd go to destroy a cohort, I had a query in the controller that would go and look at to make it applicable here. One way to sort of, stop the user from shooting themselves in the foot is when they click the destroy button, you would go get a list of all users that are members of this cohort. Maybe you might display them on this screen here and say, hey, there are currently 5 users that are a member of this cohort. Are you sure you want to remove it? Or a better way might be, or another way would be to, if you try to destroy a cohort that has users associated with it, you basically wouldn't allow the user to do it. An appropriate error message might be, hey, there are currently 5 users associated with this cohort. Please either remove or reassign those users to another cohort before you delete this cohort. So those are the kind of things you need to think about when you're talking about delete versus destroy. And in this case, we were just doing a delete. So that's why we ran into this. Now, the other option to at least stop the errors would be to do a destroy. Now, in that case, this would have all worked and we wouldn't get errors. We would delete the cohort, but it would also delete the users that were associated with that cohort.
Yeah, so you answered my question, right? So we'd end up killing all the 5 people that were there.
And which is not, certainly in this case. Now, again, that may be a relevant thing that you would want to do. That may be fine. I mean, think about, you mentioned a shopping cart example earlier. Shopping carts are going to have items associated with them, right? If you delete a shopping cart, probably okay to delete the items. Now, you're not going to delete the actual, like, the base level item from the database, but you're going to delete the association, right? It's probably fine to do it there.
So we did a destroy like in the sessions when we were writing up the sessions authentication, right? So that's a good example of like destroy where I don't want the record to stay there.
Yeah, you don't, because again, when the user logs in, that they're just going to get a new session when they log in. So that's fine in that case. I mean, again, and there's a bunch of ways. Again, you just need to decide. The other way to handle this is if you destroy a cohort, maybe you automatically reassign any users that are part of that cohort. You assign them to another valid cohort. Just so that way you don't have the issues where, because again, now your app's really broken, right? I mean, if we try to do this, it's not going to load and you're stuck.
Yeah, there ain't nobody. Yeah, I mean, we're stuck.
So those are the kind of things. Now we can go in, and again, this points to one of the features we need to implement here is I need to be able to view users and reassign their cohort inside the UI. Now, this is all fixable, right? We could go into the console, we could find these users that had cohort where cohort is ID 1, and we could reset their cohort to cohort with an ID of 2, and then everything would work. Now we'd have to, whether that's whether you want those users assigned to cohort 2 or not,
So on this screen itself, down at the bottom under the response where those 2 marks are, that's the console itself, right?
It is. And in fact, we could
like debug through that.
Yeah. Let's see what's something. Let's see, at user, does that show anything? At cohort. Let's see.
Is it the current cohort one?
cohort.where active is true. See, right now there's no active cohort.
Yeah.
And we could do user.where cohort underscore ID is 1. So yeah, these are all our admin test.1. Wonder how many of these are. I think there are probably 2. User.where and then .count. That's 3 of them. So anyway, yeah, we could probably update. I'm sure there's a quick one-liner that I could run that would change user.where cohort dot update attributes.
And so just where you're at now is what you're looking at in the cohort right there. So that count is those 3 users were assigned to a cohort. And what you've done with that delete is you've removed the cohort. So now those 3 records are just kind of like, what do I do with my hands?
Well, they're orphaned. They're orphaned records,
okay.
right? I mean, that's generally what the term that we like to use. But yeah, you notice they've all got a cohort with an ID of 1. Well, the cohort with ID of 1 doesn't exist anymore. I'll tell you one quick way to fix it though might be, let's do cohort dot last. So we could cohort dot last. So we could change, let's see how quick that C equals cohort dot last, C.ID equals 1. Can we just do that? And can we do C.save? Yeah, it looks like that works. So now if we go back here, let's see. Yeah, I don't think it likes that. Current recruits, no. Oh, okay. So now the problem though is, so let's go, if you remember our, we've got to have one that's true. So let's set,
yeah, okay.
let's see
Set
which
it
one
to
of these.
true.
So here's one.
It's 3. It was.
So we can edit this and we can set it to active.
Yeah.
And now if we go here, so now it's fixed, right? We've changed, in this case, we just changed the cohort that we deleted had an ID of 1. We changed one of the other cohorts, so it had an ID of 1.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing.
So what you just did was kind of walk through the process of like, hey, knucklehead, you went and did this. And
right.
now you got to go chase it back instead of yeah.
And I mean, the other thing, so the other thing I wanted to point out here, and I made a note of it because it's important, is if we wanted, in fact, we could do it now. We could test it out now. So inside the cohort model, yeah. So notice inside our cohort model, here's where our association or has many association is. We could do this. Now, what this dependent destroy does is sort of what we talked about earlier, where we said, hey, I want to destroy any, if there's any dependencies related to this app, I want to also destroy those folks too. So let's just do it because we're going to really blow it up now.
So the expected result here is when you destroy this cohort, it also destroys the records that were there. So those 3 records should be gone.
It also destroys the any associated record. So it's going to destroy the record that we're telling it to. We're telling it to destroy this. In this case, we're going to do the cohort with an ID of 1. We're saying we want to destroy that record.
Yeah.
But this dependent destroys says, hey, any dependencies, any foreign key relationships that are in place. So in this case, any users that have the ID of the same cohort that we're going to remove, I want you to delete those folks too. Okay, so let's see that happen. So ID of 1, I'm just looking down about. Okay, so our fall 2021 is, so if we do destroy, say okay. So in fact, in this case, my user, the user I was logged in with, was one of the users associated with that cohort. So I just blew away.
How you doing?
Yeah, I just blew away the user that I was logged in with, which is fine. So now if we do user dot all, yeah, did I blow away all the
Yeah,
users?
it's an empty
Yeah,
array there, right? So
cohort dot all. Yeah, so I think, yeah, all of our users were associated with that cohort. So all of our users are gone now. So there's really no fixing that. But I mean, that really sort of drives home the point of, you know, how this kind of stuff's very important. And, you know, you just need to be aware of when you want to delete a single record versus, now again, we had to be explicit. I mean, we didn't quite, you know, you've got to know what you're doing to shoot yourself in the foot here. We had to go in and add this dependent destroy call to make any associated deletions, but you know, but it's a powerful
so
thing.
as an example, if I wanted to just remove only a user but not the cohort, so the dependent destroy might fit better for that user relationship versus the actual cohort.
Well, no, you wouldn't do, no, because there's actually no dependency going the other way, right? A user is associated with a cohort. A cohort's not associated with a user. So and yeah, and I don't think you could. I mean, I'm just trying to think. You wouldn't want to use you wouldn't want to destroy, if you're deleting a user, you wouldn't want to delete the cohort that they were associated with. And even if you could, I don't know that there's a way to make that work. I don't know if you could put the dependent destroy here on the other side of because the other one is you'd have to put it here inside the user model. You'd have to put dependent destroy. So it may work that way. It may be a two-way relationship that will work that way too. I don't know if it works on the belongs to. I mean, we know it works on the has many. So I don't know if it works on the belongs to or not. But anyway, that's pretty much it. Let's see. Is there anything else I had there? So yeah, so just to walk through this relationship, just to make sure we understand it though, the sort of steps I took to put this relationship in place were, and you can sort of do these in any order you want, but just sort of the way my mindset works is, first thing I had to do was create a migration file, right? So in DB migrations, I created an add cohort to user migration. So in this case, in the users table, I added a cohort underscore ID field. It's going to be an integer, and then the default I've got here is none. Okay. Inside, the next thing I did was inside the create action, users controller. So if you recall, we have an active, the idea is we're going to set an active cohort. We only have one active cohort at any given time. And when users sign up, by default, they're always going to be assigned to the current cohort. So the way I handle that is like minus this, just by default, or previous to this, we had this where, you know, the user params are passed in. We just do user dot save, and then we go ahead and send out our notification email, and then send it back to the root URL and says thanks for signing up. So and then also we're creating this session ID here too. So now what I did is added this user.cohort is equal to user.where active, or cohort.where active is true. And then I had to do this dot first, which I sort of don't like doing, but what that does is basically what this does is finds the current active cohort. I mean, the dot first is because it's an active record, because it's an active record relation. That's why I had to do this dot first. But essentially, when any user signs up, we always go and find the current cohort. And in fact, this would fail. Like right now, I think if I tried to sign up, because we don't have an active cohort because we deleted or we removed the active cohort, I'm guessing if we tried to do a new sign up now and sign up as a new user, it would fail because this part would fail. But anyway, this assigns the current cohort when a user signs up, and then we just do user dot save, and that's really all there is to it. create, and then the other thing is the you know, as we looked at, is the belongs to and has many methods inside each of the models. You know, but really, just so you know, all that belongs to and has many does is allow you to do things like user.cohort. It gives you those methods like user.cohort and cohort.users that allows you to view all the users associated with the cohort. Or on the user side, again, I can call user.cohort, which is going to tell me what cohort a user is associated with.
So if we just as an option or as a different avenue, a different model, if we added mentors to this tracker, we would do a belongs to cohort inside of the mentor model.
Right.
Right.
And a mentor would have a cohort underscore ID field.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. And could has many users.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
And I mean, another interesting one might be if we wanted to assign mentors to recruits, what would that relationship look like?
So the user would belong to a mentor.
Yeah. See, it gets confusing though, because mentors
Yeah.
would just be
Yeah.
users though, right? So we'd have to come up with
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it's easier to do a flag, and that's you know, the idea was I was just looking at another avenue, right? So
yeah.
when do you get to the point where it just makes sense to make it a flag and not its own model, and mentor is one of
Yeah.
those.
Now you can hide, as I'm saying, there's some shenanigans you can do. Like if the mentor is really this dynamic thing that we need to represent, we could create a mentor model, and it could, I think this is generally the way you do it. You create a mentor model, it could inherit from the user model, right? So now we get into, you've probably heard of inheritance before, but so essentially, you know, under the covers, a mentor is just going to be a user, but in addition, we're going to stack these other things on top of it, and it might be things like mentee ID, and mentee ID would just point back to a user ID, and you know, you could whatever else, but again, that's more object oriented theory you're getting into, of using inheritance to represent this thing, because again, you've got this mentor thing, and a mentor is just a user, so it sort of makes sense to do it that way, or that's one way to do it. But so yeah, so it's, you know, that's the cool thing about software development. Also, the frustrating thing is there's 1,000 different ways to do it. We get to decide how we want to do it. And, you know, the questions like, does it scale? I mean, for what we're doing here, scaling's not really going to be an issue, right? Because the numbers are going to be small. But if you're Google or Facebook or something like that, it's one thing to make it work with 100 users. It's another thing to make it work with, you know, 1 million. You know, is it just you writing the code, or are you working on a team of 5 or 10 or 1,000 people? If so, then it needs to be written in such a way that's sort of explicit, and other people are going to be able to understand it and extend it. So that's a factor. Is it testable? We haven't even talked in all of our time here. We haven't spent much time on testing it all, but then that's the other thing is it, you know, how testable is it? There's certain data structures that are just more difficult to test, and so you may choose one data structure over another because, okay, there's no way for me to write a good test for this. So there's all kinds of things to consider.
Yeah.
All righty, that is all that I have, at least for the.
Thanks so much.
Any
Appreciate it.
questions about anything?
No, I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Well, good. Well, I'm excited, Greg, to see where you go, and I'm hoping you do great things with Rails. And if you have any issues or anything, like I say, we'll talk more in Slack. So we'll just, as far as folks following along at home, thanks. That's all I've got, and I hope you've enjoyed this. Hope you've enjoyed this series of screencasts. So.